Hey, Brandon, you are on. So, what's going on?
Hey everybody, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Good evening, good evening.
Hey,
No, I'm
brothers.
really Hey John Patrick. I'm really happy and excited to join you guys to talk about something that I feel is a really important topic. Just surrounding access with mental health in general, why it is that people have a lack in access to care as it relates to mental health, as well as some of those cultural barriers that kind of play a contributing factor as well as to mental health and the lack thereof in terms of people being able to access it or not really having the wherewithal to use it as an outlet for processing a lot of different things with everyday life. And in terms of a little bit more about me, so I am a social worker by training. I have my master's in social work. I practice out of Georgia and Florida, and anyone who's not outside of Georgia and Florida, I usually see them under the coaching umbrella. But I operate a very safe space and a liberal practice. I utilize a lot of cognitive behavioral techniques and a lot of cognitive behavioral techniques. As an example, if you were to get to a fork in the road and you had to choose whether to go left or right, I like to talk with my clients about all the pros and cons of going left, all the pros and cons of going right, and making very rational decisions about what it is that you're doing. So I find that it can be really helpful when you're analyzing a lot of situations in the present, but also when you're trying to get a better sense of understanding surrounding some of the things that you might have done in the past in terms of those decisions. What options were on the table when you encountered a certain situation, and why did you choose to make the choice that you made? Sometimes analyzing some things in the past can also help to give you some senses of clarity on how it is that you choose to move forward. And in my practice, I also like to utilize dialectical behavioral therapy practices. So if you were to Google it, it would say talk therapy. I like to really put a strong emphasis on the humanistic element and approach. I like for a lot of my sessions with my clients to be just like what we're doing now, having a conversation. I find the more comfortable and open you are and vulnerable you are, the better options that end up appearing on the table in terms of some of those solution focuses and real solutions at that.
Okay. Just real quickly, I believe when we started the show, I don't think we were live. I don't think we went live until after we kicked it off. So after the fact, and so just in case this is not our official launch, this is just like a pre-show. It was a very important topic, and so we thought that we wanted to get together to do this show before the launch. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And also thanks to John Patrick Adams again for helping us get everything together and for having us on his show. All right.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a little bit of feedback.
That's what, yeah, I think so too. All right, everybody, we're getting this together. This is our first show. So bear with us. Bear with us. We're getting this together. I think it's gone. Can you still hear it? I think it's gone.
I can hear it.
Okay. All right. So we're good. All right. And so what we want to do is this all came about pretty much this week because of the passing of Steven Twitch Boss. I'm sure that his death shocked everybody. For me, we're like watching him on TV, just watching his videos and stuff. He always seemed happy. I've never I didn't know him personally, but I've never seen him so much as upset, never an attitude, never literally nothing. And so when something like that happens to someone and you see them like always happy, right? It's just kind of jarring and shocking. And so I think that's what shocked me the most. What about you, Saron?
For me, I've always enjoyed watching him on Ellen, and that's where I first met him. Like, not in person, but on TV. And
Yeah.
he was always fun, always smiling, always dancing, break dancing. And it was really good to see someone on TV like that because I know he came from one of those dancing shows,
Yeah.
Americans, I believe. So
So
you
I
think you can
believe
dance, and
so you
he did
think
on
you can
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was really good to see him do that. And when I saw the news, at first I thought it was fake, but then when I realized that it's really real that he passed away, that really touched a spot on me because I know of so many people, who have passed away by allegedly suicide. So that really did hit me deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Brandon, what are some signs that because people say, someone posed a question to me. They asked me, they was like, well, if someone always looks happy, they never say anything is wrong, and you know, their life just look perfect, right? Like, what are you supposed to do? Like, what are some signs to someone who like gives the impression they have like this perfect life? Like, how can you even like, how would you even know to like interject and try and like help them?
You know, I'll say one thing, and I'll approach it with a great sense of realism, as I usually always do. And not often, no, I'm sorry, not all the time are you going to be able to see signs and symptoms that somebody is struggling with a sense of depression, or that they're overwhelmed with sadness, etc. Sometimes people get really, really great at being able to hide it. Whether they are consciously aware of it or not is a completely different story. It's like I could be going through some symptoms of, or some signs of depression. However, those outlets that I'm utilizing are outlets that I'm utilizing that are not really disrupting my routine. So a lot of people are coping with it on an everyday basis. And then sometimes people find out that they're not coping well with it when they find out that they're not coping well with it, right? And sometimes it ends up coming out and displaying in some of these much more deeply rooted and often traumatic experiences, i.e. suicide, right? But oftentimes I tell a lot of people, you can tell sometimes when people are struggling with certain things when you see disruptions in patterns. But that also brings another big picture into play. In today's society, I think that we don't do enough of checking on people, especially the people that we care about, that we love, that are a part of our lives. Some of those friends that we may not have necessarily seen for a while, and sometimes that checking in every so often is still not enough. It's more, let me check in, and let me check in frequently. Like, let me check in with my mom on a frequent basis. What do you have going on? What are you doing, etc. Okay, is that different from what you told me you had going on last time? Do I see a sense of progression and progressivity with some of the things that are going on in your life? If you were in school and you were a student, and I'm checking in on you, hey, how are your grades going and everything? Oh, okay, cool. It's the end of the semester. How did your finals go? Okay, how's graduation, right? Because it's like that should be coming up. So I think that if we are checking in on people and we're actually listening with that good mindful ear, I think sometimes you can usually tell when you see disruptions in patterns of behavior. And then those are some of the ones that I think are sometimes a little bit more obvious outside of, okay, you look really sad, or maybe you're having a lack of hygiene, or maybe if I'm used to seeing you care about how you look and you're dressing, you're not really caring so much about some of those things. If you have children, are you still tending to your kids and your children the way that you used to tend to your kids and your children? So it's not just about looking at the person, it's also about looking at extensions of that person.
Yeah.
How is it with work? Are you late to work more often than you used to be, etc.? So I think that we all play a part in recognizing some of the signs. I might not necessarily be a spouse or a family member or a friend, but if I'm your employer, I'm your coworker or something like that, I also too could be playing a part in just monitoring and being self-aware in how it is that my coworkers are engaging with me, or if I'm your boss, how your performance has been, and not necessarily thinking that your performance just isn't there because it's not there, but there could be other contributing factors.
So Brandon, let me ask you. So apart from those signs, because you know sometimes someone might look a certain way, say things a certain way, but apart from those other like telltale signs, what are some things that we can like look for that could probably give us an insight of that something might not be right? Is it their body language? Is that if they're too happy or too sad? What are some of the telltale signs from your area of expertise that you have seen and have even researched and studied about that we can also look for when we see people who are sad or probably suicidal?
I think that seeing people too happy is not always a sign, right? Especially if a person is probably a happy person in general. I'm probably not going to look to some senses of excitement or overwhelming feelings of just like good spiritedness as a sign of depression, if you will. But again, I want to put more emphasis on patterns of behavior. There aren't often times where you can just look at a person and say, oh, you're depressed, or you're suicidal. Most of the time, we don't know when a person is suicidal. We much more often would be able to sense signs and symptoms of depression, if you will, more so than we might into sadness, more so than we might sense signs of suicidalness. Like, people don't usually tell you, yes, I'm suicidal, but everybody has a sad day. We have sad days, right? We're human beings. So it's like, we're not always happy all the time. Sometimes we have shit going. Oh, wait, can I cuss? Yes. Yeah, I just had to think about it. Okay. It's like, sometimes we have shit going on. We're all trying to live and manage and navigate life, right? If a person were to tell me that they just lost their parent, I might naturally assume that you being sad or tearful or having some senses of maybe even depression could be something that's in alignment with that. But we're looking for consistent patterns of behavior, but consistent patterns of behavior over an extended period of time. There's nothing wrong with being sad, but if you are sad and that level of sadness hasn't gone away and it's interrupting your quality of life, if you will, and your daily activities, now we're looking at different things. And we always like to discredit some little things, but sometimes it's the little things that matter. Like if you were to if a person is not keeping up with their personal hygiene, not keeping up with your personal hygiene could also be indicative to, were you in the bed all day and you didn't really get out of bed to go and take care of yourself as you typically probably would. And again, just being mindful of what it is that person might have going on a regular basis and checking in. Hey, how have you been feeling? How are you doing? But giving enough respectful space to the response. If I ask you how you're doing and you tell me that you're doing fine, I could check in again and say, you sure? I noticed a few things seem a little bit off, but you sure you good? We can only do but so much. So I think that there's also that level of respectful boundariness that you get, because if that person is also not willing to open up and share at that time, you could also potentially make the situation worse.
Okay.
But we have a sense that suicide and these types of things always are preventable and they're controllable. They're not always preventable and they're not always controllable. And that's one of the realities of our world and the life that we live in, right? But I think that we definitely owe it to ourselves to try to play whatever part that we can while keeping a great sense of realism about how much we can do. That's how people start to blame themselves for situations that happen.
Yeah. Also think we have to start I guess like really caring. For instance, I know it's gonna sound silly. friend of I was talking about this the other day, how you're walking down the street and you see someone and your go-to line is hi, how are you doing? And they say fine, and you just keep walking, right? And in your mind, you're kind of hoping that that's all they say is like, oh, I'm fine, right? You're like, oh God, please don't stop with like this story going on, right? So we have to I feel like we kind of have to normalize like really caring and really like stopping and, hi, how you doing? You sure everything's cool? All right, cool. I'm just checking on you, making sure everything is all right. Because I think like we get so used to like the fast pace and hi, how you doing? Great. And you just like keep it moving that you don't really stop to take the time to like really try and like find out, to stop to make sure the person is okay.
You bring up a good point, Serge, because I've seen it sometimes and I've engaged with it where I'll ask somebody, yeah, hey, how you doing? They're like, they'll just kind of brush it by and not even sometimes answer the question, right? And it's like, no, how are you doing? Even if it were to be a person that was at my checkout line when I'm in a grocery store, and I've actually had like a couple people open up to me, right? But it's like, no, legit, like, how you doing? You good? Right? But I think sometimes we don't really check in. And I also believe in the opposite of that. It's like, if I could probably care less about how it is that a person is doing, should I still be continuing to ask how it is that a person is doing? Because that also could cause some senses of neglect. If I ask you how it is that you're doing and you give me something, but then I know that I'm not really caring, I'm probably not going to be as tentative to what it is that you're probably saying as I would if I truly cared.
Definitely. Yeah. So I don't know if I'm jumping the gun with this question, but this is about Black men, right? I'm trying to like,
Hey, sometimes you just jump in there.
All right, so
just go ahead and jump right in.
So growing up, I had uncles, whatever, and cousins and everyone, and growing up, like you did not talk about your feelings if you were, and I'm just gonna say a Black man because I'm a Black man. You didn't talk about your feelings if you were a Black man. You just didn't. That's not something that you did. If you did, you were like soft or whatever it was, you just didn't. And I've just noticed with my generation that we're like closed off, withdrawn. We don't like to talk about things. And I'm wondering if some of that is like leading to like some of these mental health issues and suicides, because we were never taught to like talk about our feelings and just to say what we were feeling, period.
Yeah, I think you bring up another good point, Serge. Have you ever played with a stress ball before? But like the kind that has like the gushy stuff on the inside of it?
Yeah.
So when you squeeze it, it makes that sound or whatever. So when you take that stress ball and you apply that pressure to it, when you apply the pressure, the contents of the stress ball are still inside, but it's displaced, so it needs to go somewhere, right? So when you squeeze it, it's like, all right, a little comes out here, maybe a little comes out there, etc. But I think if you look at that from a lens of suppression, I think that by not talking about a lot of things over time, a lot of that stuff begins to add up. And then sometimes you feel as if you might have moved on from a situation, but really all you've done is further suppress it. And then it's almost like a pressure cooker. All it takes is for that one extra pound of pressure, and now I've kind of blown my top, right? My pressure lid is off. And I think for that very reason, a lot of people cry in private. They don't really share what it is that they may have going on. It's like, I'm crying in private. I know that I'm crying in private. I'm acknowledging it, but I'm supposed to kind of tough it up and stay together. And oftentimes in our community, in the Black community, and a lot of other minority communities as well too, we have this saying, what goes on in the family stays in the family. What happens in this house stays in this house. Yeah. And that was how I came up with the name of my private practice, because we always in the Black community talk about sweeping things under the rug. So that was why I named my practice From Under the Rug. Let's stop sweeping shit under the rug and let's actually put it on the table and have conversations about it, right? Yeah. And so I think that when we look at this, there's a word that's been thrown around quite often, and it's toxic masculinity. That's a word that we've been using for like, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years or so in a much broader sense. But I think a lot of that does really hint over into some essences with Black men for toxic masculinity. And I don't blame just the Black man for what that toxic masculinity looks like. I also bring the Black female figure into the picture as what it looks like to contribute to that toxic masculinity. I want a man who does this, that looks like that talks like this, etc. But also at the same time, you can't cry, you can't do this, you can't whatever. It's like, oh, well, if you do, are you a little questionable? You crying, and it seems like you're crying a lot. Like, are you gay? And it's like pouring a lot of different essences over into the toxic masculinity, I think only further helps to perpetuate what it looks like to not process your feelings, right? It's like, at what point in time do we say that I am a human being, that person is a human being, and we look at things on a humanistic level and not always trying to categorize and put things into some long list of check boxes that really was kind of damned before it did in the very beginning of creation.
So my question to you is, like, for the toxic masculinity as it relates to sometimes a woman knowingly and unknowingly perpetrating that, like, what are some ways that we can diminish that? Because at some point in time, men are not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to have feelings, emotions, whether you're Black, white, whether you're part of the LGBT community. You're supposed to be the breadwinner. You're supposed to be the one that just suck it all in and just go on. What are some things that for the women that are watching, sisters, mothers, like, what are some things that they can do to help to lessen that and make men feel that it's okay to cry, it's okay to have downtime, and it's okay to actually speak to a therapist like yourself that look like you, who's not the one who's in a jacket and suit and tie? What are some things that you can advise for them to do to help to diminish that stereotype?
There's a couple of things, but I also first, in responding to you, want to say that I think we could start with Black men uplifting other Black men in that particular regard. Just like we can go to the barbershop and we can talk shop about every single other thing. We can talk about girls, we can talk about guys, we can talk about sports, we can talk about cars, we can talk about whatever else it is. But why is it that mental health is not also a topic of conversation that we're having just amongst men? And I think that once Black men also start having some of those conversations with each other to start to help normalize it, we're usually measuring that level of masculinity, if you will, against other men. So if other men are also contributing to, this is actually okay, this is something that I do, these are some of the benefits I got out of it, right? Like, if you're with your core group of guys or whatever, if you will, and you're comfortable enough, it's like, hey, me and my partner was going through some stuff. I went to go and talk to somebody about it, process, and man, when I tell you, when I finished with it, I felt whatever it may be, right? It's not just encouraging it, but it's also about sharing in some of those experiences. You don't need to go into grave detail to be able to also share those experiences with your friends to help normalize what it looks like to get a therapist or to seek out a therapist, or to just talk about your feelings, right? But moving back over to your original question, surrounding women, I think that women also sometimes can do some of those same things, having some of those conversations amongst girlfriends to help normalize and destigmatize what it looks like for men to show feelings, for men to seek out counseling, and what some of their experiences also are like, especially with mother-son configurations, with female-male spouse configurations. There isn't only one particular set of people that go out and get counseling, right, or see therapy. There's marriage counseling. Some people go out there to do parent counseling. Like there's a lot of ways that people go out and seek counseling. So I think that by sharing and talking about some of our experiences and the benefits that we feel from it, we're helping to destigmatize it and helping to uplift what it looks like to process. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about processing your thoughts and your feelings. I usually say when people ask me what is it that I do, I talk about thoughts and feelings. That's my career. That's my job, my goal.
Okay.
I think that's one of the ways that I think Black men can definitely help to destigmatize it and to encourage it. But also, in addition to that, I think that women could not only encourage it, but they could also participate in it. It's like, participate in it. Talk about it with your girlfriends. Let's talk about and destigmatize what it looks like to go and seek counseling. Seeking counseling is not a weakness. It's something that is a sense of acknowledgement that is designed to hopefully help you to progress through your situation or come up with some solution focuses. But you also have to bring a great deal of vulnerability and honesty to the table. And that's how I start off having conversations with any patient or client that I'm going to see. The more open and honest and raw and uncut you are with this process, the better the results can potentially be. The more you diminish what it might be, or you make it sound pretty when it's coming out, those are you not really, those are examples of what it looks like to not really pour into the best interests of the practice. And, while we're at that note, I think that it's really important when you're looking out to seek a therapist that you don't just like go with the first therapist. Yeah. Looking for a therapist is kind of like dating. And I'm like, legit, I mean that in every essence. It's like I'm looking at profiles, right? So like, for example, I'm on Psychology Today, and I also have a profile on Therapy Tribe. Yeah. But when you're going through and you're seeking through for therapists, it's like, all right, did you make sure that you put your insurance plan in so that you're only getting therapists that are underneath your insurance plan? Or did you check off the filters for maybe the type of therapy you feel like you might need? You want to find somebody who actually speaks to you and what your situation is. But also, not every therapist has the same practice. Some therapists operate from many different types of treatment modalities, and not every treatment modality is going to work for every single person. But it's really great to do those consultations up front. Like I do a 10 to 15 minute free consultation. I want to make sure that not only am I a good fit for you, but that you also are a good fit for the practice.
That is true.
You may not necessarily respond well to my particular treatment modality. And at the same time, I want to make sure too that while I'm talking to you, you're telling me about your stuff, that I'm not potentially taking on something that could even be triggering for me. Just because you're a therapist and you see people and you try to help people to process their problems, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to be the best fit for them. If I am currently going through a divorce, and then someone tells me that they want to process a divorce, maybe I'm not taking on any patients right now that are dealing with divorces, so that I can make sure that I don't transfer or counter transfer my stuff onto them or their stuff onto me. So even as a therapist, it's about having a great sense of mindfulness and awareness too, with that therapeutic bonding, if you will, with new clients.
So I have a you want to go ahead, Saron? Or?
No. I was just going to say that to your point, Brandon, is that when people look at therapists, yes, it's just like dating. They have to have some particulars for what you want, because I know that if I'm looking for a therapist, I want to talk to somebody who looks like me, who more than likely talks like me, have some similar, not exact, but at least similar experiences that I can probably see myself with them. Because if I'm talking to someone who is charging me $2,000 an hour, and this person doesn't look like me, I'll be less inclined to open up, much less spend that money to see that person. So if someone that looks like you or someone who looks resemble like you, will be more inclined to be open and be more honest and more forthcoming to make sure that my feelings and emotions are actually fully brought out. So I do agree with that. Dating and choosing your therapist is really like the same thing, that you have to make sure that you get what you want. So that is really a good concept.
And you'll find a lot of that stuff out. You'll find a lot of that stuff out during a consultation process, right? And I think that it's also important to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves or pigeonholing ourselves. There aren't a lot of therapists that look like me, right? Like
Mhm.
it's a heavy female dominated industry. There are definitely not a lot more white therapists than there are therapists of color, but it is definitely changing. But also in terms of male therapists, when you take therapists and you dwindle them down to males, regardless of race, it gets smaller. Then you say black, it gets even smaller than that, right? So I think sometimes it's also good for us to check our own biases. Why is it that I want to talk to someone who is a male? Why do I want to talk to someone who's a black male? I could find someone who might be a black male, but does their experience for what I think I'm looking for even equate or relate to what it is I'm going through? So that it's really
That's true.
important to go through that consultation process. And if a therapist doesn't want to do a consultation with you, it's probably not there. I wouldn't recommend you to move forward with that therapist. Do not go and spend your $140 an hour or whatever it may be trying to talk to somebody that you actually don't know has a great sense of compatibility. When you finish with that consultation, there should at least be a great sense of optimism about the process moving forward. Like when I finish with my consultations, not only am I excited about beginning the process with the potential client or prospective client, but they're also excited. Like I really like when I hear words like, "Oh, I'm really glad you said that. Oh yeah, that really speaks to me. Oh yeah, I'm glad you said that. I want to talk about this too." So I think that consultation process is really, really important to make sure that you feel a great sense of optimism and excitement. But even if session number one starts and it doesn't necessarily seem like it's working, you are not required to continue to move forward with that therapist. But at the same time, I think we also have to remind ourselves of what patience looks like with the therapeutic process. A lot of today's society is about instant gratification, right? Like we got on this broadcast right now, we're broadcasting to I don't know how many people on several different platforms, and it happened just like that.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we take some of those same concepts into other things that do require not only just a lot of patience, but a great deal of understanding. What things have already happened? How did that contribute over into where it is that we are right now? Now that we've gotten all that together, what does it look like to come up with real solutions? So I think sometimes we have to just be patient with that process and say, hey, let me approach this with a little bit of honesty. If I've started this process with a new therapist and I'm not really seeming like it's not really seeming like there might be a connection, let me throw that out there. Hey, Brandon, I know that we've been talking, but it seems like there might be a disconnect here. And when you said this is what made me think whatever. Like give your therapist is a person, right? They're a person, they're a human being as well too. So I think just like we're talking about encouraging honesty and communication and vulnerability, you also have to have that same type of open and honest communication with your therapist. If something's working really great, let's praise the things that are great. But if something's not really working out great, maybe we don't need to throw the therapist away. Maybe we just need to be honest with this person about how it is that we feel. And sometimes you might get your feelings hurt during a session, but that's okay. It's part of the
Sometimes.
process, right? It's like I'm not expecting for you to be completely okay with everything that I say. I'm expecting for you to be uncomfortable. I want you to be uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable you are, hopefully it might shake up some of that sedentary sentiment that has been sitting around and open up an opportunity to remove some of the old and bring in some of the new and refresh, right? Or to just bring in some senses of refresh perspective, if you will.
Yeah. So, Brendan, I have a question for you. I actually talk about this a lot. Do you think parents and and
Where are you
and
going with this, sir?
parents and more to the point, African American parents, and this is an important word, unintentionally start to damage their children at an early age? Example, right? Growing up, right? You fall and you start crying and you legit hurt. And they say, don't cry. Not even the moms, too. Moms and dads, don't cry. Boys don't cry. Or they say, be a man, and they throw out stuff like that, right? And so for me, I think they're teaching the kids at an early age to hold your feelings in. If you're upset, if you're angry about something, don't cry about it, hold it in. And so, of course, for me, and this is just what I'm thinking, when you get older, right, you take that with you because that's what you were told as a kid. And so I'm wondering if parents, I know parents, don't be mad at me. I know you love your children. This is why I say unintentionally damaging their kids.
Yeah, I think that is what's happening. And I also think that quite more often than not, what is happening is cyclical, unhealthy patterns of behaviors. Because while I might be a parent and I might say, suck it up, don't cry, get up, go and do your thing, whatever. Did my mother do the same thing to me? Did my father do the same thing to me? Did my grandma, my auntie, or my uncle do the same thing to me, right? So I think sometimes we're going based off of just what we know, and it's these unhealthy cyclical patterns of behavior until something happens. Hopefully something happens and it's like, all right, I can recognize that this is probably not the best way of doing this, right? But quite often than not, depending on what you're exposed to in life, you may not know it. You might find out by watching TV and watching some show that's talking about parenting and what it looks like. Somebody could be watching this right now, and now they're like, oh, maybe I need to think about what it is that I'm telling my kid, right? But I think that there's a boundary. There's a healthy boundary and fine line with what it looks like to teach resiliency, because I think that's what parents are attempting to try to do more often than not. And then also teaching your kids, what it looks like to be nurtured. Like we have a thing that we call nature versus nurture. So nature is like just your body's natural chemical makeups, how your brain is functioning, and all these other different things, like inherited aspects, right? But then we also have the nurturing aspects too. It's like you can fall down, and I can show you that I can come in and I can be there for you. I can clean the wound up, whatever the case may be. But maybe the next time you fall down, because I know that I have the capability of doing it, maybe I've already planted a seed that is changing your turn of events to say, okay, if dad is now telling me to, get up, not don't cry, right? Because crying is processing. I think if you're crying is processing. If crying is happening for an extended period of time, that needs a different type of modality, right? But you fall on the ground and you're crying, and I say, it's all right. I know you fell, but you got this. The handlebars are right there. Take your left hand, grab the handlebar, put the right hand on it too, and let me see you go on ahead and do it. I know you got this, right? So I think that there's a certain level and way that we can teach resiliency, but I think we also have to manage that fine line boundary between what does nurture look like and what does it look like to teach resiliency, and then also celebrating resiliency, right? Like if I have a test that I completely bombed, but let's say my professor is giving me a redo. If my parent says, hey, these results, like, I don't know what's going on with these results, but what do we need to do to make sure that we're getting there? Let's have a meeting with the teacher. Let's see what areas you didn't do so well in, and let's make sure that we study on those areas. Now the test is coming up again. My kid goes and does it and goes and has his test. My kid gets a satisfying grade on this test. We should also celebrate that level of resiliency as well too. I think more often than not, especially in our community, we integrate a lot of fear mongering into our kids. It's do as I say, not as I do, and all these other different types of things. And I think that that is one of the worst things that parents could probably do with their kids, is to always tell their kids what it is that they want for them to do and not give them any sense of reasoning or justification. Yeah. It's like, if somebody tells you to go and walk out in the street, are you just going to go out and walk out into the street? It's like, no, I'm probably not going to do that, right? Yeah. So I think that is one of the things that has been heavily perpetuated in a lot of minority cultures, where we tell our kids what it is that they should be doing, but we don't necessarily really give a lot of reasons as to why. It's like, no, you can't go to that party. But no, I can't go to that party is, were my grades bad? Did the teacher call? Am I still on punishment and I forgot that it was still happening? Did I say something wrong? It's like, so then you have your kids sitting there with a great sense of resentment. And when your kids are sitting there with a great sense of resentment, what we're really telling our kids to do is to resent us, resent the parent. And I think that is one of the worst things that you can do. And then as adolescence quite naturally goes through the progression, when your kids go from like that cute 5, 6, whatever it is, and then they get up into like, okay, I'm 11, 12, and I'm 15. Now that sense of those senses of resentment are met much stronger than what they would have been when that kid was a lot younger. And this pattern of behavior has been carried over so long throughout the process. It's trying to undo something that has had years in the making of getting it to where it gets. And then it's like, well, they don't ever listen to me. Did you ever really give them a good sense of rationale and reason as to why it is that you even say what it is that you say? Do you talk to your kids about why it is that you are doing what it is that you are doing, even not even related to the kids? Sometimes I think that we can share in our experiences with the children. It's like, for example, let's say that divorce and separation, right? It's something that happens all the time. I think last I checked, the divorce rate is at like 55% in the United States. Yeah. So when we look at a lot of things like that, when we're talking about, oh wait, Saron, I think I just see you on the screen. I don't know, maybe I'm still there. But when we are when we're looking at separations, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I'm only staying because of the kids," or we're going to work this out until the kids graduate high school. No, teach your kids what it looks like to have a sense of resiliency. Life happens. Daddy and I were together, or daddy and daddy, mommy and mommy, we were together, and now we're going to show you what it looks like to be healthy co-parents and to be respectful to each other and to still be kind to each other. And if your kid were to go through that, would you tell your kid to stay in a situation, or would you tell your kid to probably choose them, right? So I think that quite often or not, we miss all these opportunities to share in our kids some of these cognitive behavioral skill sets and thinkings that we're doing. It's like you teach your kid how it is that they can rob Peter and pay Paul. So when they get older, they know how to rob Peter and pay Paul. But did you teach them some of these other emotional, intelligent things as well too? Yeah. Oh, I'm not with daddy anymore because daddy used to cheat on me, or mommy put her hands on me. That's why that should never be acceptable. So I think quite often we miss some of these opportunities to kind of show kids what it looks like to be resilient.
Yeah. We got a comment from Tobas Dude. We just said that this is a generational curse. Like until we as parents recognize a toxic upbringing, will continue to pass it on. Most parents are clueless as toxicity, so you can't blame many of them.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think that there's some truth to that?
No, I think when we're looking at this hashtag generational curses, that's what I was giving more emphasis to some of these unhealthy cyclical patterns of behavior. But also, I don't want to lean a lot of it over into not knowing. I think that sometimes we do know. We know if something makes us feel good or if something doesn't make us feel good, right? You know, it's like if I put my kid on punishment, but maybe it also started off with the spanking. Did I feel bad about putting my hands on my kids before the actual punishment began? Do I feel like I needed to do that? And can I also be vulnerable and humble enough with myself to be able to say, hey, you know what? I didn't handle that the best way, and I apologize for that. What I said still means what I said, but let me practice some humility with that. But I think that sometimes we aren't necessarily aware, but sometimes I think that we are aware, and we just need to pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah. Do you think the pandemic made mental health worse?
Oh, absolutely.
Or do you think it just like brought it out to the forefront because nothing else was going on? Everyone was stuck in the house. Or do you think it actually made it worse because we were stuck in the house?
I think that the pandemic did several things. I think that one thing that I think is really important is that the pandemic caused for a lot of people to do a sense of self-actualization, right? And a sense of self-assessment. It's like, what is it that I have going on in my life in terms of how I'm navigating? How much am I dependent on these external factors? Can I even enjoy my own company? And when I am enjoying my own company, what does that look like? I'll tell anybody, I think the best gift that you could ever give yourself is to figure out how to enjoy your own company. When you figure out how to enjoy your own company and human beings decide to be human beings, i.e., somebody hurts your feelings, or you end up going through a breakup, your mama done pissed you off, your good Judy or your best friend or whatever the case may be has kind of stepped out of lines. I think that when we put so much emphasis on external factors, we sometimes are demeaning what it looks like to have a sense of value and appreciation for just kind of having some me time. And that's not to diminish anybody's feelings surrounding what they went through with the pandemic, because that was like more of an existential crisis over an extended period of time, right? But I definitely think that it calls for a lot of people to do some senses of self-reflection. Like when I talk to some of my patients, because I launched my private practice during the pandemic, like I got laid off in March from the pandemic happening in 2020. In May, I had my first patient, right? So, you know, I'm talking to people surrounding what does it look like to work in this other room over here? Do you have a diffuser in that room? Do you have enough lighting in that room? Do you love the paint that's on the walls in that room? What does it look like for you to have a lunch break? Are you eating in the house? Are you taking a walk down the street? Can you take your lunch and go to a park? Can you order in from that nice restaurant that you like? So I think that it calls for a lot of people to look at their home surroundings and figure out what does it look like to be comfortable here. I've even talked to my patients about, are you comfortable with your mattress and the pillow that you lay your head on? Yeah. Do you like the creature comforts that you give yourself with your body wash and the moisturizer that you use? Do you like the scent or the smell that's there? Sometimes I think that we don't think about some of these little nuances, but some of these things make a big difference. So I think for a lot of people, it calls for them to think about what home life looks like. Yeah. And then with some people who are able to continue to work from home, what does it look like for me to be able to continue to work from home, but have some good, healthy senses of boundaries between what's my work time, what's my me time, and everything. Like sitting in one room all day could also yield over to some senses of burnout, right? It's
Well,
like,
let me ask you this. There's a, normally you see the ads on TV for to get a therapist through your text message or through phone or FaceTime. Like, do you believe, because of the way how technology is moving, that people are moving from face to face with their therapist and now doing everything through a text message or a phone call or FaceTime? And do you think that is the right path to go, or people could still come in the office, knock on the door, sit in the sofa, and have that one-on-one conversation with that person? And do you believe that that will allow more so like Black men in general to have that dialogue with someone face to face?
strong. I don't think that there is a right or a wrong way, broadly speaking. And I say that because I feel like accessing care is accessing care, right? If you are talking to this mental health therapist or this life coach and you're in the office, or if you are walking down the office from your primary care physician, it's like the therapist is over there, or you're doing something like this and you're getting what you need through some form of an electronic means. I think just being able to access care in general is like a really big win, right? To have the wherewithal to say, I feel like I might need to talk to somebody, or somebody suggested it to me and I can understand where the benefits might lie in. I think that it's great just to access care. If you need to do it through a text message, maybe text message is how you start off, but then that text message could possibly migrate over into an in-person session or a virtual session. To take it a step further, like, I am a living example of what it looks like to help people in this format. I don't see any of my patients in the office. I started my practice during COVID. It started off as virtual, and it is virtual still continuing to this day. I have not had anyone say that the virtual process did not work for them and that was why they were ending sessions or anything like that. So I definitely can't speak to it from a personal experience, but it's nice to know that I can go and take that vacation for a week and I can still schedule my 50-minute session with my therapist or my hour session with my therapist and not have to completely have my therapeutic process be interrupted. Or I'm working late at work and there's really like a private office that I can go and sit in and I can still make my session, as opposed to, hey, I was late to work, traffic this, whatever the case may be. My kid that, sure, go and pick your kid up from school early like you need to. And then maybe there's a private space in the house that you might be able to go to. I have sometimes my patients do sessions from the car. They will go to a random parking lot or they'll go in their driveway so they can get away from family and spouse and have privacy. I have some patients that would do sessions right in the car. I can't tell you how many times that they've let the sun turn their phones off though, because it overheated. That happens quite often. But no, I think that accessing care is a win, regardless of how it is that you're choosing to access it. I think there's more emphasis on making sure you have a good fit, more so than it is the way that you're accessing the care. But in addition to that, I don't think that seeing someone in person or through virtual video should really be a determining factor. I think you should make sure that you feel really confident that this person is going to be able to assist you.
I have a question for you, actually, really quickly. It's about mental health and social media, right? For instance, for me, like Instagram, I would follow accounts on Instagram and I would see like, oh, they got a Bentley, oh, they got a nice house, oh, they're always taking these trips. And I noticed, even at my age, I started to feel a certain type of way. I can't even lie. I was like, well, damn, I work hard. I don't have all of that stuff, right? And so it got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to unfollow this person or this page or whatever, because it's not sitting well with me.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm old enough to know just to go ahead and do that. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you think that affects kids who see that, like, who look at the Kardashians or look at whoever, right, and be like, I don't have that, I don't look like that. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how does social media
influence mental health?
Influence. Yeah.
I think that some of those kids interpret that the same way that you just described, right? Like you said, oh, well, I see this and maybe I want it.
Yeah.
And there's not necessarily always going to be an issue with wanting something.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm circling back to parenting. If you know that your kids use Instagram, why not have a conversation with them about Instagram or Facebook or social media, as opposed to feeling as if I'm the parent and they're the child, and this is a separate world, right? Like, we don't share in this world. Or I'm a parent and I have all these social media accounts. I'm just not interacting with my kid about their social media account. So who are you following these days? Who influences you, whatever the case may be? And they might give you some of that information. Yeah, I follow such and such, and she always wears like these things that are very fashionable, and she don't even really care about brands and labels and stuff like that, X, Y, and Z. And I think that when you have that conversation with your kid, is that something that you're interested in? Do you think you're interested in fashion? Okay, maybe that turns over into a conversation that we're now having about what you want to do when you're done with school, and maybe some of the different fashion schools we might be able to look into, right? So I think that oftentimes social media can play a really big role in mental health, in terms of either the haves and the have-nots, or the one thing that I'm usually more conscious about, which is counter-transference. We talked about that a little bit ago in the beginning, and I was saying that I could be looking at your timeline, and then now what you're going through in terms of like your sense of sadness, your sense of depression, or whatever the case may be. I've seen that, and now maybe after seeing it so longer through so many different accounts, I've now internalized that, and it's not even my shit, right? Or it's just like watching a soap opera or something like that. Sometimes we have emotions and feelings and reactions to what is just acting. It's no different than what it looks like to follow somebody's social media account. If you're not aware of the types of people that you follow, maybe you could be following toxic people, and it causes you to be a little bit more toxic, right? Or maybe you're following people who are right. It's like, or you're following people who are uplifting, that you feel are inspirational, etc. You also could embody, even subconsciously, not in the conscious mind, but even in your subconscious, you could be embodying what some of those feeds look like that are inspirational or uplifting to you, or just make you feel good. Sometimes following feeds that just give like these little nugget text of positivity or whatever, if you will. Sometimes following some of that stuff could really help to set your day, especially if you set your intentions about doing it at the beginning of a day.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense.
I think everybody should be mindful about who it is they follow, why it is that they're probably following it. And it's not to say that you can't follow people for some senses of other gratification, right? Like, if somebody works out and they have a really nice body, you're like, okay, I really like looking at this person's body, or maybe I feel that this person's body is inspirational to me, right, for what it is that I want to do. So it's not to say that you always need to follow people for that particular thing, but just being consciously aware that your timeline followings aren't like these unhealthy cyclical patterns of you're following the same type of toxic things.
Well, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So, Ron, I know that you wanted to talk briefly about mental health in the military.
Yes, definitely, because even though for the mental health is a whole, sometimes we have to like bring it in sometimes, and I do that in the military. I'm just going through some stats here where it is said that in 2021 that 30,000 active duty personnel and veterans who served in the military before 19 died by suicide, and that is a lot. So I do know that it happens in the military, and oftentimes, especially around this time, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, when some service members cannot go home
Memorial Day,
to be
Labor Day.
with their family members, that's when they get pressed a lot, and they stay at home or stay in the barracks, and then they just sometimes take their lives because of depression. So I know that let me ask you, Brandon, have you, I don't know if you have or if you have dealt with anyone who probably a veteran who was and then they got out of the military. Have you ever dealt with anyone like that before? Like within
No,
your
I haven't.
practice?
No, I haven't dealt with anyone that was suffering from depression specifically as it related to their time serving, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, I have dealt with members of the military in practicing as it relates to different substance abuses. That's
Okay.
definitely been a thing, because sometimes, it's not always um, suicide is what's on the table. Sometimes I just want to do something to make me feel good, or to numb the pain, or to quiet down my thoughts, whether that is
Hmm.
weed, ketamine, cocaine, whatever the case may be. I think sometimes those are some issues that can be more things of what I have seen and what I probably would see. But I haven't dealt with anyone who was in the service and they were specifically dealing with that particular bout of depression.
Okay, okay. Because I know that with the research that I saw, it just says that in 2022, as many as 44 veterans died on average a day per day from suicide.
Mm.
And for 44 people to die a day, that is a lot of people
Yeah.
to
Was it referencing active service
yeah,
members? Do you know? Was it active or was it just veterans in general?
veterans in total, just veterans, like veterans,
Oh
those who have
yeah,
been
that
out in the
makes
military.
that makes sense, and I know that that sounds very crass, but that makes sense to me because we're not just looking at what those experiences look like while that person is serving in the military and their active duty, but we're
That's just
also looking
veterans.
at yeah, so it's like we're looking at what it looks like for them to take some of that stuff and carry it with them, like baggage, if you will, that never got
Mhm.
addressed. But then also, how long are the lines at the VA's office when a veteran needs to go and get a prescription? Now that I've had real life experience dealing with some of my friends. It's like, okay, you need to stand in this really long line in order to get your meds, or the appointments are set out but so far, or the number of facilities that you have access to go to are not really far and beyond. Like maybe there's one veteran affair agency that's in your city, and that's the only one that you have the option to go to. Or like I want to talk to someone about mental health, but I'm pigeonholed into only having these particular therapists as providers to me, and I don't have access to others, right? So now that I could totally understand how it is that over a series of different types of events, not having access to housing, sleeping on the streets. Sometimes I could see if a person says, you know, it's better for me to just not be here than to live life the way that it is that I'm living it.
Yeah.
Or if I don't make that shelter time, and if I don't make that shelter time and I'm needing to figure out what it looks like, I think that all of those different things could certainly contribute to a high instance of suicide rate.
Okay.
Brendan, I just have one last question for you because I'm looking at the time and we've already
Mhm.
taken up so much of your time already.
No, we're good.
And so I do just have one last question for you. I was reading an article, I believe it was a couple of days ago, right after the thing what happened with Twitch, and it said that the suicide rate for Black men is up. Why do you think that's the case? Like, what do you think is going on now that more Black men seem to be taking their lives than previous years?
I do think that there's one particular thing that I like to look at, and when we're looking at some of these, how do I say it? When we're looking at some of these instances of suicide, I think a lot of it too kind of pours over into what you were talking about in terms of the things that we incorporate into our lives, like for example, social media.
Yeah.
What is it that we see? What is it that we're striving for? Is it even attainable in the first place? How is it that I'm trying to get there? And then how many setbacks is it that I'm experiencing along the way of what it is that I'm trying to get to that is also causing for me to feel some symptoms of like a failure, if you will. And I think that that's definitely another bigger contributing factor. I think quite often than not, we are not baselining what it is that we are looking for in terms of a great sense of realism about what it is that we want, what direction it is that we're going in. And sometimes, whether we are consciously aware of it or not, we are setting ourselves up for what that failure looks like.
Yeah.
It's almost like you guys ever heard the thing? It's like if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if you fail to add a great sense of realism into your plan, you also are setting yourself up for what it looks like to not feel successful, right? And I think that you can only have but so many of those things. And there's a lot of other societal things that we're exposed to now that I think we should take into consideration. All of the George Floyd things, the Tamir Rights, like all these different things that are happening, right? I think that we sometimes are often taking in some of that stuff because some of that is our everyday life. It's what a lot of us African Americans and Black male African Americans are experiencing. I want to dress a certain type of way, so I'm stereotyped in this other particular regard. But then if I were to potentially conform and present myself in a different type of way, now I'm experiencing what it looks like to not be authentic, and I'm inauthentic and how it is that I would like to present and just being me. Right. So I think that when we are looking at a lot of the things that are going on around us in the world, I think that that also is contributing over into some sense of suicide rate or even sadness because it's exposed. Black men didn't just start getting shot out in the streets like, you know, over the last like 3
That's
years.
true.
It didn't just happen. Right. But we have cell phone recording. We've talked about this several times before, but it's like we have cell phone recordings. We have ways of capturing this stuff.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff is displayed in the news. I think that that is a lot of lived experiences for a lot of people, and for some people, they don't see a way out of it.
Yeah. Actually, we're hoping to do a show later next year on that topic, which is racism in America. And so, so maybe we can have you on
I'd
again.
like to look at I'd like to look at those statistics, and I'd like to look at those statistics and break them down by like some specific constructs in terms of how old were these people, what was the modality of death. Like it can say a lot too when you look at the psychology of how it is that a person commits suicide. You don't oftentimes see that women in general are committing suicide by gunshot. Women are normally committing suicide through other means that are typically a little more slower, like the cutting of wrist, or maybe sitting in the car in the garage, if you will. So different things like that. Men usually more often tend to do suicide at other intervals that might come across as a little bit more aggressive, if you will. But I'd like to see what some of those modalities were. Were they pills? Were pills being utilized? And then when you take that and you measure it to what it looks like for a person to have the wherewithal for a successful completion, if you will. Sometimes people may want to do it, but then they weren't able to go through it because they didn't really have the education of what it would have looked like to try to completely go through the rest of the process of ending their lives. Like, you're probably not going to end your life swallowing quite a few of Benadryl, right? It could happen, but it's probably not. Like, I've seen some severe cases that I've had as patients. It was like, okay, you took like 50 Benadryl, but we're here, right? Your stomach got pumped and everything else. So it'd be nice just to look at some of these people who have committed suicide and study some of these people who have committed suicide. What did they have going on in their lives? Can some of those stories be told by some of the people who were closest to them to say, well, you know, hey, my partner was struggling with this, or my brother was struggling with this. This was an issue. This was a deal. Once we look at some of these things that were contributing factors to people committing suicide, I think we also can start to pinpoint out and put solutions to those particular things. Like when Saron was talking about the military, what does it look like to have a lived experience as a Black man in the military? Are there some specialized things that we need to speak to the military about as it relates to the experience of a Black man in the military?
No.
So, and I don't like to think that anybody's death is in vain. And as post-mortem as it sounds, when you think about an autopsy report and you think about what it is that a person does in terms of the research to figure out what happened to this person is telling us a story even after death. I think that the things that are happening with suicide, like, I hope that we can find out more information about Twitch and what might have been going on in his life by some of these people. We hear about a lot of these things as chatter in the background. Hey, what happened? Was it a heart attack, or like what was it? And we whisper about a lot of these things. I'd love to see if we could destigmatize and normalize some of these situations that happen to people. Like, for example, if a person were to be HIV positive and the person died from complications of that, well, there are quite a few people who don't access care because they either don't know how to access care, they're stigmatized surrounding what it looks like to access care, and all these other things. But let's not have so many conversations in the dark. Let's have more conversations in the light, so that hopefully we can share in what it looks like to have some solutions with some of these issues that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I said, hopefully in the new year, we can get together and do a roundtable. I do see the dope ass dude is watching, and so maybe we could do a dope ass dude crossover.
I like the screen name.
What's
up, dope ass dude?
So great name.
You
back, Brandon. Where can people reach you if they want to reach out to you, if they need some help, assistance, or questions?
So on Instagram, you can reach me at from.undertherug. That's the Instagram for the private practice. I'm also on Instagram. My personal page is Relentless Rebel Kennedy. My practice's website is FromUnderTheRug.com. And I always encourage people to shoot me over a text message, set up a time for a consultation if that's something that you're wanting to do. And you might even have questions that are surrounding somebody else, right? So not just taking the information for yourself, you might be taking it so that you can give it over to somebody else. Sometimes we may not feel that we're necessarily in need of a service, but we can always give that information over to someone else.
All right. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers with before you go?
Yeah, some good information, some good nuggets.
I think that quality of life is something that I'm always talking to my clients about. And if you feel that you are not having a great sense of quality of life, I think it's never a too late time to do a good sense of a self-assessment and do some check-ins with yourself. Am I happy with my career? Am I happy with the goals that I'm progressing towards? Am I in healthy relationships, right? Like, am I in a healthy relationship with a partner? Am I continuing to contribute to unhealthy patterns of behavior? I think that a lot of things start with a good sense of self-assessment. And again, since we're talking about suicide and a lot of these other things, check in on people, but also check in on people and try to keep that healthy boundary of what it looks like to check in on a person.
Yeah.
If checking in on a person looks like asking them how it is that they're doing and they tell you that they're doing fine, there's nothing wrong with pointing out some things that you don't see right as to why it is that you're asking again, but have that respectful boundary. You don't want to come from a place where you potentially make a situation worse. Sometimes you can't always lead a person to care, if you will, but you can definitely put a nugget out there and see if a person bites it. But if the person doesn't, it's ultimately their choice and their free will to access care when they truly feel like they might be ready to.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Saron, do you have anything else you want to add in?
No, I just want to say thank you very much, Brendan, for coming on and sharing this information with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, the last minute. So thank you very much. And
you know what? I can't forget. There's one more, Saron, like the suicide hotlines. Like, there are a ton of suicide hotlines. You can also dial, I'm pretty sure it is 311 or 611, so that you can reach a lot of other different help services that the United, oh God, what is it called? United Way. That they offer a lot of different services. If you are looking for groceries, if you're homeless, if you are experiencing suicide, whatever that may look like, there are a lot of different ways to get help. If you were to call some of the suicide hotlines, they will talk to you right then and there. Those people are trained, they're therapists, they can walk you through it, and they will assist you in getting care after some of those initial conversations that you might have. So definitely reach out, go and get the help. It may not be a friend or a family member or a teacher or somebody that you feel you can go and talk to. You can definitely, more than likely, give a lot of that to a perfect stranger who also has a giving heart to just want to be there and be supportive.
Yeah. All right, Brandon, we will put your information in our description, as well as hotline numbers, just in case anyone needs them. We appreciate you. We thank you for coming to join us tonight. Dope ass dude, thanks for everything, because you helped us behind the scenes and you didn't want us to shout you out, but we are anyway. And Brandon, again, sometimes next year, we hope to do maybe a roundtable or something. So it'd be great to have you back on with some other guests to get your opinions on a couple of topics and issues.
Yeah, maybe the next one will be in person. We're gonna try it out. This is the electronic format this way. Maybe we'll try it out in person that way.
That's a good idea. And dope ass dude, we're gonna drag you in on this. So don't think you're gonna get. All right, ladies and
thanks
gentlemen,
for having me.
Coming out. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for everything. Saron, thanks. See you later. All right, everybody. Peace.
All right. All right, night.